So really what we're going to have today is what I'm hoping will be a really honest conversation, but not necessarily an easy one. We purposely wanted to pose some questions to our panelists and have a wide variety of panelists that are going to maybe have some different perspectives on social enterprise. We heard from David earlier that he didn't always identify as a social enterprise. That isn't always the language he uses. And we perhaps pulled a diverse panel up here who also may or may not identify with that language at different times. And as we heard from the bios, come with different perspectives, maybe their personal perspective, their family perspective, their wellness perspective, as well as their perhaps professional perspective. So what I'm going to start with is, I'm going to ask you to tell me about yourself, but in a very specific question. I want you to tell me which perspectives you're bringing to this conversation today. And it might be more than one. It might be a variety of things from your life that you're going to pull from your experiences that are going to influence how you respond to these questions today. So what perspectives are you bringing to the conversation? And maybe we'll start. David looks excited to answer this question. I'll let him start.
That's a really great question. The first perspective I'd say is, the entrepreneur. I've run my own company and I've been involved in entrepreneurship for close to 20 years. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. I love the drive that the entrepreneurs bring to our community and to our society. I don't love all the headaches, literally and figuratively, that come with being an entrepreneur a lot of the days, but I think if you look at what entrepreneurialism does, it changes the world for the better. And when we look at social enterprise in particular, there's a lot of opportunity there. I think, community, engaged community member would be the second one. I've volunteered with the Pillar Nonprofit Board for, I think, 10 years and really respect the organization and the impact that it's had. And I think working together in collaborative spaces like this, like Innovation Works, or even coming together as a group of 100 strangers to talk about social enterprise is a real way to make community change. And last, as a father and a family member, I want a better community for my children and hopefully eventually grandchildren, and just leave the world a better place than we found it.
So my perspective would be an immigrant and a person who's been formally trained in, business, like regular business, a for-profit business through my MBA, and then started a corporate job as soon as I moved to Canada. And it wasn't until I was laid off from there, I was at home and I was feeling not so productive, so I started volunteering at a nonprofit, and that's where I accidentally kind of found out about social enterprising. So my perspective, I would say, is to just, somebody who's been trained in business, and also an immigrant, a person who has a family and is trying to raise a certain ethnicity in my family, and also just including people from my culture and other cultures in what I'm trying to do.
Thank you.
I would say the primary perspective I bring tonight is commitment to community building. Having been at YOU for so long, I'm kind of typecast, and yet I don't see myself as typecast as the guy from YOU. My perspective really that I hope to bring is typecast as one of the many voices that's always focused on building this community. My paid job is to help do that so that young people can be more included within a community that otherwise they're not. But my perspective really is to help build a healthy community in the city. I'd say the other perspective is probably, I don't like to describe myself as an innovator, so I don't like that word. That's the word that I think, and as soon as I say it, that's what I'm saying, but I don't mean it that way. We've been doing it a long, long time. So we've been doing social enterprise before the word was even around in anybody's lexicon. And we didn't get into it for a lot of the reasons why it's growing right now. Not that that's a good or a bad thing, but we had a very focused reason for getting into social enterprise. So I certainly have that perspective for why we're even here now. I think I'll just stop there.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. I'm here. I'm here professional and personal because I work for Red Cross, which is the world's largest social enterprise, but they don't identify as such. So coming from the world of social innovation here, that was a bit of a mind shift, kind of a step back in time, really. And then I volunteer also with Red Cross. So I see the efforts of our social enterprise working to help people in disasters. Then I also founded a social enterprise about 10 years ago, and I've been in this field a long time as well, before it was really a thing on anybody's radar. So I got it on both sides, personal and professional. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, I guess I come from the perspective, and when I was listening to you, I don't really know. I think, I worry a lot about an aging society. I think that jumps out to me a lot, particularly in the health and wellness field that I come from. I know we're not ready for it. I know this world is not ready for what's coming. I worry about that a lot. Obviously, running a social enterprise was really cool after coaching and advising social enterprises, and then not even knowing how to spell social enterprise before that. But from the corporate world, bringing that business sense into it was really interesting. Brought a definite different flavor to it. And so I guess I come from it from a bit of a troubled perspective. I worry.
Okay, thank you. So given those different perspectives, I'm expecting very different answers to my next question. And it's a question that I get asked pretty much every day. I probably give a different answer every day. What is a social enterprise? And the reason I ask this is because at Pillar, we don't really have a definition. I always say if you ask 10 people, they'll give you 10 different definitions of what social enterprise is. They might give you 20, 2 each. And really what we talk about is principles of social enterprise. We talk about earned revenue. We talk about social and environmental impact. So are you following the principles of social enterprise, including business and community in the work that you're doing? The legal structure is a bit behind that. As you see, we have a lot of different legal structures sort of operating within that space. So for me, it's about the principles of what social enterprise is. But I'm curious, especially for those of you who have been doing this and have been in this space before that was a word, and for those of you who may or may not identify with the term, the label of social enterprise all the time, what does social enterprise mean to you? And do you identify with that label all the time? Anybody can please feel free to start. I won't always start with David.
I would go with impact. I mean, when we tour people around so the Innovation Works, I think everyone can relate to that. Like, what impact are you making in the world? In fact, when people come into the space, when they apply, our question, the application question, the interview question is, how do you want to change the world? So if you have an answer to that, you're creating impact somewhere. And so, to be very simple with it, to me, that's kind of what it is, impact.
I've attended a number of conferences. YOU used to belong to it's international, but it's primarily U.S.-based association called Social Enterprise Alliance. And in Canada, I don't even know if we still have one, but we had one. I don't even know if it's still around.
Canadian.
Yeah, Canadian. And attended the Canadian conference when it was a newer association. One of the vast differences, the Americans didn't care about what it was called. They didn't care about the definition. And the Canadians had whole workshops on it. And and I guess I kind of align with the American thought. I know it when I touch it. I know it when I see it. And I know when sometimes organizations call them that and it doesn't resonate for me, then for me it's not. But that's not about profit, nonprofit. That's not about the corporate structure. It really is about that very tangible, demonstrated impact that that entity is focused on. So sometimes entities will say that they're social enterprise, and to me, they lose me when they can't quantify in a pretty altruistic way what that community benefit is. Again, whether they're at the end of the day making profit or not, I'm not so concerned about that. But are they actually demonstrably organizing themselves around an impact, or is it something that just sort of happens along the way? If they're demonstrably organizing around it, then I rally to that towards the social enterprise. But if they're like a CSR mandate, sometimes just pulling chits and counting that as impact, then to me that's not social enterprise, because you're looking to justify something when really it's the raison d'etre to me.
Can I go? Okay. I think for me, it's the really being accountable to the practices, how you're conducting your business. So, being an entrepreneur, I'm conducting my business. The pillows that we're making with the refugees, and it's really important to me to know how that process takes place. It's a lot harder. It's not like just hiring a couple of sewers and just telling them, okay, this is your pattern and go ahead and do it. It's a lot harder, but it's that satisfaction and again the impact that you have on their lives and on other things that we hold ourselves accountable to, and just really knowing what each step is doing for the people, and again the practices, the really being accountable to that. So
Go. Yeah. Actually, thinking about it while the other answers were coming in as well, I think actually we should probably flip the label and call enterprises that aren't social antisocial enterprises. And what I mean by that is I'm a believer in capitalism, and I believe that if you add value into an ecosystem, you should be able to extract equivalent value or a little bit more than what you put into the system. What happens with other enterprises is they actually transfer or exploit wealth from other areas and transfer it into their own pockets. When you set yourself up as a B-Corp, we're a B-Corp, it's a certification that we are actually not exploiting the resources as we add value and make profit as a business. So we're continually adding value into the ecosystem. So if you're actually not operating as a social enterprise, you're actually acting as an antisocial enterprise. And I think that's a shift, and maybe that's some of the tension that you pick up in Canadian versus American differences, is the difference between being social and antisocial. And I think that as people, we should always strive to be social.
Should have known better to follow David. Social enterprise for me, because the social enterprise I founded was food-based, is social or environmental good. And I always feel that I need to add that, and maybe for most of you it's just intrinsic, you know that, and I find that it's important to specify that. So local food, for me, being near and dear to my heart, is especially a social enterprise. And sometimes people don't think that, but the fact is there's a cost associated with being a social enterprise often, not always, not a blanket statement. But it costs us more to drive to the local farmer and buy raspberries from her. So it's $5 a pint. But the impact that Lori said that we have on that farmer is so significant for that $5 pint versus what we do driving to the grocery store. So there's a personal cost to doing it, there's a financial cost, but it makes the world a little bit, 1 pint of raspberries better for me, really, because they're delicious, but for her as well. And that's the little, it's just such a fine difference for the definition. I struggle to define it for people.
It's interesting, I'm picking up on this idea of antisocial and how do we sort of measure this other piece. So if we talk about, we often measure the financial impact, we sometimes measure the environmental impact, but that social piece especially can be difficult. One time someone had said to me that every organization has impact, only social enterprises measure it. Oh. This idea of all organizations are having impact on society and the environment, either positive or negative, but the majority of those organizations just don't talk about it. It's not a positive story for them. So social enterprises in some ways are just measuring the impact that they are or not having in those different areas. This idea of, I've heard the idea of an impact balance sheet or an impact accounting system. So how do we make a financial statement and an impact statement equal in terms of how we need to run our business? So I'm curious, a couple of you mentioned this idea of accountability and sort of measuring impact in a very tangible way for the community. Are there specific ways that you do that as an organization to hold yourself accountable, specific metrics or measurement tools that you have found useful, or perhaps some that you have found not useful as well in your work?
I can maybe jump on that. B Labs has the B Corporation certification process, and you can take the impact assessment regardless of whether or not you intend to certify. There's a separate certification process, and I'd highly recommend anyone that's interested in exploring what social enterprise means, or what measuring, they use the tagline, measuring what matters. There's a lot of things that you can measure in your corporation that you may not even be thinking of about your day-to-day business practices. So to be a certified B Corp, you have to score above 80 out of 200 points, which just goes to show how much variation there is in your ability to B Corp. And we're around 86. Rachel can correct me if I'm wrong. The first time we certified, we were at 83. And we thought we were like, a case study for exactly what it meant to be a social enterprise, and we should be a slam dunk for the B Corp. And when we actually started measuring the things that we actually do in our community and the ways that we show up, the way local vendor purchases is another thing that you measure that you may not think about your local purchasing policies, but now we have a local purchasing policy where we prefer local vendors. So all of those types of things start coming out. So those tools are available, and I'd recommend. And we actually had a full day kind of retreat today, and one of the things that came up is how that it would impact on our impact assessment, because continuing to do well by doing good is an important part of our value system. And that tool, knowing that there's that question on that assessment, gave us pause to think about whether we wanted to continue down a certain path or not. And just that reflection, regardless of how we choose to go for the business, that reflection point is really important for us.
If I can just ask a question, is there any organization that does keep social enterprises accountable? Like what are you doing? You're not doing anything, like you were talking about in the middle, I'm sorry, from you, and I don't know what you is either, by the way.
Why are you? Why are you?
Youth
Youth
Opportunities Unlimited.
Okay.
So we're a local not-for-profit organization.
So is there any organizations that keep organizations accountable? Because what you're saying is very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, I think, again, from the
Money
B...
being spent without anything happening.
Yeah, the B Corp certification process is a pretty rigorous process. That's the only one I know of that exists. And the
It's not
nonprofit,
like a Better Business Bureau or anything like that.
I would say it's the same process as the Better Business Bureau. It's a pretty, again, it's a rigorous process. It took us about 4 years to become ready to certify. Libro just did it in town, and I know they've been talking about it for a couple of years. There's nothing that exists beyond that, but they do actually audit your materials. They do come in, I think 10%. They actually fly out and meet with the B Corp, so there's a pretty rigorous audit process. That's the closest that we have. In the nonprofit side, Every 2 years. Yeah, we have to recertify every 2 years. And on the nonprofit side, it would be more the governance responsibility of the board to hold them accountable. That's where the nonprofit side really needs strong governance in the board.
And in the meantime, I don't know, does anybody know anything about the Freedom of Information Act? Like you got this much money, what you do with it, and what's tangible? Like, could I get that information?
As a B Corp, no. Although if you look, you can find that information in some of our annual reports and things. We tend to over-report the requirements. Nonprofits and charities, that information is available.
Yeah, so
It follows similar metrics. So a social enterprise isn't a distinct legal structure, so they follow the same governance structure that a not-for-profit or a for-profit would. A lot of it comes down to the communication and sort of how are you internally measuring that impact, how are you communicating that out, as a consumer, keeping those businesses accountable to what they're saying they're doing, and for the community and for the environment. If you went up to David at the London Brewing Co-op and asked him around, okay, well, can you tell me who those local vendors are that you're using? He said that buying local is something that your organization supports. I'm sure he would be willing to have some of that conversation with you and understand some of the details of that. Is there anything else around the nonprofit sector in terms of sort of internal measurements?
Yeah, I can speak to kind of the measurements we've had for Innovation Works. It was, when we created Innovation Works, and when I say we, it was a community of years of in the making of happen, and there was investments. There were we had the $1 million community bond, which investors actually get a return on, which was the first in London. We also had donations, and every year we create a report for those donors and for the investors that have put money into this nonprofit, this social enterprise nonprofit, and we measure things like we said we were going to bring social innovation. Well, that's a tough one to measure, and we do a lot of work on what does that mean, and we boil it down to connections. So one of the things that we believe strongly is that you have to have nonprofit, for-profit, and government all looking at project or issues and problems together to make impact in the community. So we look at how many times those kinds of individuals come together, and we report on it. We actually say, we've had, and we give examples and we give communications on that. We have to be very, very diligent with the funds that we are receiving.
Yeah, like charitable stuff.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and we owe it to our donors, we owe it to our investors, and we owe it to the community, because it was the community that built this
But
place.
is that your go free choice to say, okay, here's all our information, you can have it, or is that like a requirement?
Some of it is required. So, we don't necessarily need to report in a nice, concise way, but we choose to do that. And I think to me, that's the thing about social enterprise is you don't just measure your bottom line, your financial. For example, with Verge, and I can speak to that a little bit, which is a social finance arm of what we do. We lend money to social enterprises. Many of those social enterprises come in and we ask them, well, we can lend you this money, but we need to know, how are you going to measure the impact with the investment that we're making? And we need to know what those measures are. And that's a struggle for some people to articulate, and we help them determine what that is. But they have to come back and show that they've done that in order to get those loans. So it is far, far more advanced than it ever has been. I can say that.
Thank you, guys. My next question is really around, again, some of the tough questions that I get asked every day. I'm hoping you guys will have better answers that I can then give in the future. So if you hear me quoting them in the future, this worked. Sometimes we get pushback about this idea of social enterprise, either from the business community, from the charitable sector. We hear it from both sides sometimes, this idea of this common middle ground, this idea of earning revenue and creating impact. There's a lot of sort of tension in this, as Andre pointed to earlier. I'm curious if you guys have had any specific experience where you've had pushback around this idea of being a social enterprise, either from customers, from the community, from your boards, from funders. You all sort of have different backgrounds. Have you guys had some experiences where you've had some pushback? How have you reacted to that?
I can say, working for Red Cross and coming from the world of social innovation, I've lived in social innovation most of my career. So I was super excited to go work in innovation. I work in the innovation department of Red Cross and be like, yeah, social innovation. They do not identify as a social enterprise whatsoever. In fact, it's a dirty word in the charitable world. The fear is that if a donor hears that Red Cross earns money, that they'll stop donating, or that they'll be fearful, and they'll wonder, how do we measure it? How do we track it? How do we know exactly? And our charity reporting is exactly the same, whether we're earning the money or whether it's a donor-funded thing. What it means is that you're not paying the admin on certain parts of our operations, so that all of our money can go do other things. But being so excited to go to the world's largest social enterprise that is not a social enterprise officially was a little bit strange. And the pushback was, you can't say that. No. We are not a social enterprise.
You know we're filming this.
Yeah.
I
We
know.
won't show it to them though.
So not officially, my thoughts and opinions do not officially reflect the standard line of the Canadian Red
Excellent,
Cross.
thank
Yes.
you.
We started doing social enterprise at YOU 1993. We developed our first one, and it took 3 years from, hey, here's an idea, to launching it. So it actually launched in 1996, and it was a recycling program. It still exists now. We have 4 social enterprises. Each of them are based on a training model. So we developed social enterprises as a vehicle for training young people, particularly young people that had limited work experience, limited education. For them to get into the job market, they were just hitting a wall. Particularly finding a job that had any kind of what they would see as a potential. So prior to having social enterprise, YOU used to spend a lot of its time coaching young people to really dumb down your expectations. You're going to start at the bottom, blah, 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 blah. But hey, that's okay. That's how people start. And then dealing with employers, dumbing down their expectations. Well, so-and-so's never worked before, and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually, if everything worked out, we would count that as a success. And we got into social enterprise because fundamentally we didn't see it as very successful because you don't get to dream. If you're a young person with a grade 10 education or even a decent education but never worked before, how do you show somebody what you're capable of doing? And that's why we have social enterprises. So fundamentally, it's a training program. And so for us, the pushback, and it has been over those period of 20 some odd years, funders saying, hey, I think you should be independent of government funding by now. Well, now we are, but that's only because the government turned down our last application. So woohoo, we're independent of funding.
Congrats.
Exactly. A goal met. Metric met. And on over to not so much private sector folks, but more at the board of directors at YOU. If you ever walk by our cafe, sometimes at the front of the cafe, you'll see it looking pretty sparsely populated with customers. And our board was, they're primarily private industry people. So they would want to teach me and the other folks that don't know how to run a business at YOU, we can really turn this into a business model and really make some serious cash. Well, we would have to fire the people that we're set up to employ at this thing. Because what makes using the restaurant, we all understand the restaurant model, what makes it different? Every single restaurant that's not a training-based social enterprise, whether you're a social enterprise or you're a for-profit restaurant, you need a dishwasher, you hire a dishwasher. If that dishwasher's good, that dishwasher will have a career with you and might be promoted and so on. We will never, ever, ever hire a dishwasher. But we have dishes, and what we do is we train. So, for example, we have a young woman that's training with us right now. She's got 2 university degrees. She got sick after her 2nd degree. She couldn't work for 2 years. She was convinced she will never, ever draw a paycheck anywhere. Ever. Even with 2 university degrees. She ended up in our social enterprise program because of a referral from a community partner. Started off in the back of the house, and sure, she washed dishes. She also prepared food. That cafe prepares on average 350 meals a day. Some days it prepares up to 1,500 meals. That's the record. All from scratch, because we're a training facility. So we're constantly teaching people, which costs more money than a typical restaurant. We can't charge more. So now without any government funding, that comes from what would normally be profit. Mm-hmm. And she started off in the back of the house. She's now working the front of the house, and she has learned that she's got a good sense of humor. She's learned that she can make people laugh, and she learns that they make her laugh. And that's the conversation she's having, and how is she going to take that to a career. If we were a traditional restaurant, she'd still be washing dishes. So that's the difference. So we get pushback periodically. We can make that cafe full all the time. Well, you know what, we can. But I have people that will cry periodically if they accidentally prepare a garden salad instead of a Caesar salad for you. They think they've just destroyed you. And their confidence zooms down, and they run out of the restaurant crying. And you know what, they would be fired in a traditional model. But in our model, they're not. They're coached.
Goes back to what Megan said around the idea that sometimes this costs more. There are real financial costs, and I think we often talk about sort of the nice side of social enterprise, but sometimes there's some really hard business choices there, and I know having conversations with David in the past, he's come across some of those. I'm sure everybody along this panel has. Do you guys, and Megan I think experienced this on road tripping for us, sort of pitching social enterprises to traditional businesses. Has anybody else on the traditional business side had some pushback around, why are you doing this social enterprise thing, or what the heck is this?
So it's this approach of, so what, Okay, so you're, employing these refugee women who don't have any skills, they don't speak English, they sew really well, so what? What's so good about your product than what I would buy at HomeSense? And also from some of the funders, in the business world, they really want to see how much money I can make, instead of having that triple bottom line that we all talk about, planet, people, and then profit. So to me, no matter how I explain it to them, sometimes it's just like, you know what, you're just not my client, or you're just not the people who are just going to get it. So I'm just going to be at Innovation Works with my community and talk to them about my business and
Our growing community.
growing community for sure. And sometimes you just have to let it be, I think, because people are going to keep saying, okay, well, so what, yeah.
Yeah, we come from being very blessed, and I'm very grateful for the community ecosystem that we're part of. Again, one of the things with B-Corps is it is about maintaining the best interests of all your stakeholders, which includes the customers, and that's one of the things that a B-Corp measures is that you're not exploiting your customers, you're not exploiting your staff. So we've never really had any pushback, because the way that you actually operate as a B corporation and as a sustainable business is oftentimes in the best interest of anyone who would intersect with you. And we tend to hang out with people who kind of think the same way and have the same core spirit animals. So we haven't had a lot of pushback. In fact, it's helped us win some business when people understand the B Corp community, and that there's a shared values, and that we do measure our impact on our clients, and that we want to make sure that we're having a positive impact. And then there's a third party accountability, that we're accountable to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our customers, we're doing the right thing for our employees, we're doing the right thing for our environment. So for us, it's been a net positive ride. I haven't had to experience any of the negative trade-offs. I think sometimes there's some, there's some overlap with some of what the nonprofit community does. Basically the co-op speech, I could have said ditto. We're just structured sort of differently from a corporate structure standpoint. So there's some confusion, I think, about, well, if you're doing good, aren't you a nonprofit? It's like, well, some years yes, but some years no. And it's the structure, and so we haven't had that negative experience.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to add anything?
Can I just add, I forgot about traveling around. Talking to small business centers, I had to look around. I don't see any, but if you are from a small business center, I'm so sorry. Nikki, I know you're here. Yeah, hey, Nikki. When I first started talking about social enterprise to the small business centers in Southwestern Ontario, the comment was, we treat them like a business. Either you are a business or you aren't. And in 5 or 6 years, if you survive and if you can pull this off, you can take your crazy idea of whatever your social enterprise is, and donate to a charity. I don't know why you want to do this. You're a business or you're not, so we don't deal with them. So that was surprising. Again, remember, I come from this world, right? Everybody loves social innovation here, to be hit in the face a lot of times with, social enterprise isn't a thing. No. It's not a real thing.
Any good responses you've come up with over the years?
A lot of questions. Mm-hmm. Get out of the Kaufman triangle, right? So that's very interesting you say that. Can you tell me more about that? What about goodwill? What about YOU? What about B Corporation? We just ask a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. That helped.
I would say the other piece, like I said, I can never keep quiet. I don't know why they asked me to facilitate or give me a mic. One sort of challenge that I push back on some of those business pieces is business is there to solve problems. When we think about a business, the first question you tend to ask them is, what problem are you trying to solve? What's the value that you're providing for your customer? We're essentially asking the same question of, what problem are we trying to solve? But we're thinking about it in a different way. What community problem are we trying to solve? What value can we add for our customers, for perhaps clients, for our employers, for our employees, So it's just a way of asking, to me, the same question of, how are we solving a problem? Mm-hmm. And then how can we hopefully bring in sustainable revenue from that? The idea is still to get to revenue neutral, or at least revenue neutral, hopefully it's bringing in some profit some years. I have a couple more questions, but I want to also leave some time and open it up to the floor. I know Andre has a mic over there.
15 minutes.
Yeah, you got a mic over there? I want to open it up to some questions on the floor, and I'll pop back in with these questions as well.
Are there questions on the floor?
If anybody has some questions that they ask
If you do,
panelists.
put your hand up. Julie will keep going, and if you put your hand up, I'll come around.
Maggie almost has a question.
Yeah, I'm not even like sure how to word it.
Can I get to the mic?
One sec,
to you?
Andre's got a mic.
I always think I'm really loud and I don't need one of these. So forgive me that I'm going to fumble a lot with this, but one of the things about social enterprises that I hear a lot, and maybe you have heard a lot, is this talk about profit. How is it profitable? Is it profitable? Am I going to be poor being a social enterprise? And that's actually one of my worries, going into this. I'm like, Am I going to walk out with a paycheck at all every year? What does that look like? Is there, I guess, what are people getting into when they're getting into social enterprises when it comes to profit? Is this something that I can become a millionaire off of? Not my goal. But do I walk away with something, or is this me fully giving? So is my job as, I guess, this entrepreneur or as this owner, am I dedicating all of my finances to this? I guess is my question.
I can maybe speak from practical experience. I've owned a business for 18 years now. I don't know what the average salary would be, but the lowest is probably $35,000 a year, and I've made up to a total comp of about $120,000 in a good year. And it varies. And I think if you talk to any entrepreneur who's owned a business, they would probably tell you that the same basic story is true. You have your good years, you have your bad years. I've had an offer to buy the business for 6 figures that didn't go through. So being a social enterprise hasn't impacted my ability to generate income. My business to be an effective business owner has definitely had more impact on my ability to generate my business income. Some of the choices I've made that I think would be mistakes that any entrepreneur would make on a day-to-day basis. So I don't think having a social enterprise lens limits your ability to draw a meaningful income. If you look at Wholesale Foods, they're a conscious capital. They sold for $1 gajillion to Amazon. Danone Foods, Ben & Jerry's, like there's lots of successful exits for B-Corps as well. So it's not a limitation on your wealth. There may be some trade-offs along the way. You may be delaying that wealth generation, but I think that's a choice. And the cooperative had the same talk. You could make more money, but you choose not to. And the nice thing with a for-profit structure is whether you're a cooperative or B Corp or for-profit, you have that's a choice you can make. And I've always chose to sleep well at night and not exploit any of the stakeholders in my business. I could have probably made more money personally, but I've always slept every night. I hit the pillow relatively guilt-free. I mean, there's some stupid mistakes I beat myself up on a regular basis. But I've always respected the stakeholder interests that we have. So, and I've done well some years not so well. And I think if you got any of the entrepreneurs and put a few beers into them, they'd tell a very similar story.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Just getting back to your comment about driving out to the countries to buy a quart of strawberries. Like, I don't get it. To me, that seems very unenvironmentally friendly.
Yeah,
But
sure, I can talk to that.
You can explain it to me.
Okay, so this is my master's thesis, so brace yourself. I love this topic.
I will say we have 10 minutes
paid him
left.
$20 to come because this is amazing. So urban fringe farms. So when I say drive out to the country, I'm from Sarnia. So we have a number of urban fringe small family farms that live within the city limits of Sarnia. You have a number of them in London as well, and especially within London, Middlesex, St. Thomas. Those urban fringe family farms are environmentally friendly, typically, even if they do not have to be organic to be environmentally friendly. And I'm sorry for organic people here that feel differently. And what they do is they support ecosystems, they support wildlife, they support flora and fauna that are native to the area, they support migratory birds, other animals, butterflies, bees, all of these things that are essential to our ecosystem. On top of that, urban fringe family farms are watershed development. So when we live in a city and it rains, and we have concrete landscape as you do downtown, that water runs off into our watershed, the Thames River, and we have to treat that water in order to make it not poison our waterways, essentially. When you have a farm in the middle of your city or within your city limits, the water is actually absorbed into that farmland and put up into produce. Now, the only way that an urban fringe farm can continue to survive is if people buy from that person. They can't get into Loblaws. They have to have extraordinary levels of produce to make it into a large-scale grocery store, and they have to sell at rock-bottom prices, which don't equal. So sure, they're willing to work probably for next to nothing. The average family farm income is about $35,000 for the primary earner. So that person's willing to make less money to provide you with strawberries that help the environment. They see a bigger picture. The only way they can survive is if we buy from them directly. So when we drive to the country, yes, it costs gas and carpool, Nothing's better than picking strawberries with a group of friends or even people you don't really know. It's like the best thing ever. So go on out, carpool if you can. Public transit, you're lucky in London that you have that. We have public transit out to 2 urban farms in Sarnia. And you can go and you can pick produce and pay a little. It does cost you money. There is an environmental cost. That's the cost of social enterprise. You go, you support them, you buy. They earn their no money. They live a very difficult life. But what they do, we understand as farmers what we do for the environment. So that the impact is so broad compared to just a quart of strawberries.
What's interesting is I think after a year or so of working with Megan, I might be able to do a master's in this agriculture.
No,
but for real, I do love it. And I have learned a lot about local farming from working with her. My last question for you to sort of end us off is sort of looking into the future. I think this idea of what we call shifting to the middle, this bringing heart and mission together, those are the same things, heart and money together into the middle, and sort of thinking about social enterprise as a whole variety of things. As you can see, we have a lot of different legal structures, a lot of different organizations that we're talking about social enterprise here today, as well as a lot in the room, and some more you'll hear in the incubator pitches. If you think about sort of the next 5-10 years of this movement going forward, those of you who've been in this movement for 30 plus years, what excites you? What do you see sort of up and coming in this that you're thinking, hey, I can't wait for this?
I'm excited that consumers typically are really conscious about where they're spending their money. So whether they're companies, doing local procurement policies or extra points for a local procurement or environmental impact or whatever, we see it for sure in all of our social enterprises where we know they're getting great service, great product, but they can probably almost always get it cheaper somewhere else because it's competitive, but it's not rock bottom. When we were first starting out, we used to lose a lot of customers because, hey, I thought you were not-for-profit, you'd be able to do a better deal because you're not trying to make a profit. And so it's kind of interesting, even other not-for-profits. And well, sorry, we're not whatever provider. You got to go to them if you want the cheapest game in town. We're not it. But we don't get that anymore. In fact, we never take advantage of the customer, but we find that the customer seeks us out because they're going to buy a gift basket, they're going to get recycling, they're going to go for lunch or get a catering or whatever. They want to spend the money where the money feels good to spend it and have a community impact. Whether that's our social enterprise, other social enterprises. I seek out Dave's beer only because, hey, I seek out beer. But also, you won me on the paying the premium for local hops. That part I didn't know. Another reason to look at it. And I don't go around looking for what's the cheapest beer in town because I think a lot of people are in that boat. That if you can spare some extra coin on when you're making a purchase, as a whole, we're choosing to make our purchase where we have an impact we want to support.
The growing market for this is what excites me too. So that was the right answer.
Growing.
Would anyone else like to give a wrong answer? No, I'm kidding. What else excites you guys?
I've been seeing a lot, and when I first started, the work that's being done in academia, it's oh my gosh, like there's whole courses on social enterprise at Ivy. What? Like, seriously? Like it astounds me that that's happening, and there's a new breed coming, and that's really exciting.
You've met our summer students, I see.
I have.
I think from my perspective, again, I brought the entrepreneur lens to begin with, and I believe that a true entrepreneur sees a problem in the world and they think that they have the unique ability, wisdom, collection, network, or whatever to solve that problem. So an entrepreneur will start a business to solve a particular problem. What ends up happening is there's a mismatch of incentives. You go through the system and build your business, you're only scored on your profit and loss in a traditional business model. So that can actually steer you away from what your core purpose is, the reason you started the company. You start to drift, and because you're only measured and congratulated and you only win awards in the business community if you have a higher profit margin, generate jobs, that sort of thing. So you can actually get pulled mission drift. You talk about it in the nonprofit sector, it happens real fast in the for-profit industry, and I think having that alternative scorecard, that impact thing that you were talking about, that allows an entrepreneur to say, okay, I need to still continue here because money and profit, and that's our oxygen, and that's how we continue to do the good work that we're doing. I still really want to solve this problem, though. There's an alternative scorecard that says, hey, you're on track to make a positive impact. We don't have that scorecard right now. The B-Corp assessment is sort of the closest thing, but really, if you go talk to your bank, if you go talk to your traditional lenders, they want their profit and loss, they want your debt to equity ratio, they want all these different things that really don't maybe matter to the entrepreneur because they really just want to solve this problem, but they have to play the game the way that the game needs to be played to get access to the resources and to employ people. And it's all this I don't know, it's a game. So being able to have an alternative scorecard so that you can, I think it will actually unlock a next era of entrepreneurialism that you can continue to solve problems rather than just generate profit.
I think for me, it's just seeing all that opportunity for people who are marginalized. And I think in a traditional business, you go for an interview, and if you have certain skills when they do that prefabbed kind of interview, if you have those skills, you get hired. If you don't, then you're not good enough. So I think the opportunities for the marginalized people in our community, it could be refugees or immigrants, it could be people who have had issues with justice system or anything, or disabilities and things like that. So I think just seeing those opportunities for people who are in the past, treated as not good enough is really exciting for me.